Welcome to Driven to Lead. I'm your host, Wayne Brandon. In this series, we explore the real-world stories of key executives to find the leadership lessons that help move us all forward. If you like these conversations, we'd really appreciate it if you hit the subscribe and like button. It'll help us out a lot. But now, we got another great program for you today, so let's make it happen. We've got a great program for you today. We have Fay Niewiadomski. And Fay is a very special person. She's a consultant, she's a coach, she's an author, she's a speaker, she's a trainer. She's been around the world with her business over a number of years. She's established schools and universities in 4 businesses. She's developed thousands of experimental workshops to public and private sector activities. She's a strategic intervention and leadership coach who's worked with CEOs and board members and presidents. She's a cultural transformation consultant, and she has as one of her products the 4 Journeys of a Leader, a flagship leadership development program. Fay's a very special person. She's been a dean for many, many years at schools, and she's offered guidance and leadership to people of all ages. And we're very fortunate to have with us on the program today Fay Niewiadomski. Fay, welcome to the program.
Thank you, Wayne. I am really looking forward to our conversation.
Yeah, me too. We had a short pre-conversation a few weeks ago, and it left me wanting to ask you a number of questions and hear much more about what you've done because it's just so extensive. Tell me about the fact, you're managing partner at ICTN, the International Consulting and Transformational Network. Tell us about that and your work and how that really is a continuation of the great work you've been doing your whole life.
Well, the company was actually founded in 1993 and has gone through many different transformations and developments. As time changes, as history changes, as business changes, the company has evolved. And what finally happened is I looked at our balance sheet and I asked a question: where is our profit coming from? What is it that we do that distinguishes us from the rest of the world? And when you're young and exuberant, you want to do everything and you want to do it for everybody.
Right.
And we decided that was a recipe for disaster. So we focused on our strength, which is working with senior management. It's not as crowded as the space where everybody wants to work at the bottom of the pyramid and provide packaged programs. So we identified 3 really powerful programs because the people who matter, the people who impact organizations are the leaders. And unless you can reach them and work with them, you're not making a difference. You're just, maybe you're making money, but you're not making a difference. And making a difference was what mattered to me. And the 3 pillars we landed on were leadership transformation, leadership and culture transformation. And that's not a slogan, because culture is about the way people think and how those thoughts inform their behavior and the impact that behavior has. So leadership and culture transformation. But that's not enough. The second pillar is business emotional intelligence. This is not soft. This is hard capabilities. Things like, how do I make decisions? How do I influence people? What drives me? Am I adaptable? Am I going to be able to deal with the changes and challenges? And, conscientiousness and dealing with stress and turbulence. So we use a scientific approach to this, where we can actually create the metrics that predict success and failure at work by applying business EQ. So, but there's still a component. If you can't communicate effectively, you can't be an effective leader. So even if you have great thoughts and you make good decisions and you have that business emotional intelligence, if you can't connect people together, if you can't deliver your message in a way that's authentic and that's taken seriously by other people, you're not going anywhere. So strategic communication is the 3rd pillar. Leadership and culture transformation, business emotional intelligence, and absolutely strategic leadership communication.
Yeah, excellent. Well, that's That's a really good foundation. And, to just reinforce what you said earlier, to boil it down to the things where you're adding value in the world, wherever you're going to add real value, that's where the value will come back to you and your colleagues and your company. So I think that
Very
makes a
true.
lot of sense to do it that way. And it's very highly aligned with my experience, leading
Hmm.
businesses for 30 plus years and now being a business coach and an executive coach for 15. I find that those areas you're talking about are absolutely critical. I know you have a construct where you talk about competence and you talk about courage. I talk about competence and character, really the same types of things.
Hmm.
And then in the communication piece that you mentioned, I think it's really important not only to know what to communicate, but to know when to communicate and how deep it should be and how it should, empower the organization to really align behind those cultural values that you mentioned are so important. They're more than just words on a website. They're actually the character drivers of an organization, pulling people together and aligning those things. So I am 100% aligned with your philosophy and what you're doing. So, who do you work with primarily in doing this work now that you've identified this really sharp focus for these three pillars that affect businesses, affect organizations?
We work with large multinationals that have global presence. A lot of them happen to be in the healthcare, in the field of healthcare,
Okay.
medical devices, and we have done a lot of transformational work for them. It's not surprising that that's who we ended up with because they are the people who need to connect others together in order to move their business forward and to promote a belief in their products and services on so many levels. So those are the people we've worked with. We've worked with their leadership teams. We've worked with very high profile, talented individuals within the organization. We've worked with other sectors. We've worked with industry. We've worked with banking. We've worked with FMCG. But the point is, we work with people. But not all organizations have the same philosophy and approach to what people mean to them. Although they very proudly say, people are our most important assets. If you look at their budget, that's not true.
Mhm. Exactly.
So we
Yeah,
work
I
with the
think,
ones who follow through on their words.
yeah, who actually really believe it and want to make a difference there. Well, my philosophy is that we can all bring home, a profit at the end of the day or solve problems and do a number of things, but it's really only meaningful when we bring other people along with us and the way we touch lives and build community and build capabilities that matter across organizations that really are going to be the things that we take with us at the end of the day. So I think it's great that you're working with the people who are serious about that. Now you have some of these characteristics are now wrapped up in a number of things that you've written over the years, but you've got a new book coming out. I think it's already out. The Decisions
Is
That
a
Matter. I like on the cover it said rethink. See what it said? Rethink, reimagine, and restart your life. I mean, what a call to action that is. Tell us a little bit about it.
So Decisions That Matter is a title that took me a really long time to come up with. It's not easy to come up with a effective title because finding an original and unique title is a very tall order when you look at the number of books being published.
Mhm.
But one of my favorite quotes of all time is Heraclitus's character is destiny. And if character is destiny, the choices that character makes are what map the path to the destiny. And therefore, decisions are so important. I differentiate between a decision and a choice. And for me, a decision is a strategic direction. You're looking at something that's really going to make a significant difference in your life. But a choice is an option. It's just tactical. Am I going to go left or right? Instead of am I going north, south, east, or west? I mean, just to create that directional analogy. And we underestimate the power we have when we can make a decision, and we assume that we need to wait for permission or that we need to wait for someone else to give us that direction. And it never works because it's not where you're going. But so many of us get lost and begin to accept the belief that direction comes from outside and not from ourselves. The awakening that it's not begins to occur in mid-career when I see people now saying, well, I've just invested 30, 40 years of my life working really hard, working, trying to survive, but nobody sees me. All that effort hasn't led to what I expected it to lead to. And that is when they begin to ask themselves difficult questions and genuinely need someone to facilitate the journey by helping them make difficult decisions. Sometimes it's life changing where you say, well, I don't really want to continue in this industry, or I don't want to continue working for someone else, or I don't feel very satisfied with how my life is, and I want to make fundamental changes that will change the course and direction of my life.
Yeah, there are times when we do have the luxury of considering something over a period of time, maybe seeking some data, seeking advice of other people. And I see how you characterize those as decisions. Certainly, it's a type of decision that's different than when the floor falls out from under you and you've got to make a decision, or you would call it a choice, very quickly. Some of those can be fairly impactful as well in our lives. And if you do, to your point, if you do have the chance to put more thought, more consideration into something, especially if it's going to have a long-term impact, there's a real art, I would say, to making those decisions well, seeking the correct amount of information and guidance and support that will be necessary to making a likely better choice versus being bogged down in too much information and never really having 100% certainty, so you won't make the choice. So there's a lot of dynamics there that really would argue your point that having a mentor, a coach, a guide, a support service to be there with you to say, listen, we've been with people who have made this decision before. We've looked at the data. We know how the outcomes are moving forward. That's such a comfort, especially in these more major decisions. And so I think that's what I'm hearing you say.
I'd like to add a dimension to that, Wayne. When we say character is destiny, it means that we have certain human needs that come first. And to pick up on the word certainty, the more certainty people need, the lower the risk they will take. And the lower the risk they will take, the smaller the scope of their lives. So, understanding what is it that drives your character? Are you someone who's looking for change and adventure? Are you looking for certainty? Are you looking for relationship? What is that power? What is it that you believe is the most important need that you need to fulfill? And depending on that hierarchy of human needs that you have, and I'm not talking here about Maslow, I'm talking about needs that merge into values. Those really define the direction you will take, and it becomes a pattern. Now, when we become conscious of that pattern and we become aware of the limitations of beliefs that we place on ourselves, which we're not always aware of because we assume that this is how it is and this is normal and this is who we are, until we become conscious of the rules and limitations we're placing on ourselves because of things we have accepted without question. We then begin to unlock that mental prison that may have kept us much smaller than we should be and less willing to take risks because we thought certainty was more important than anything else.
So a kind of a first cut of that character then that you're bringing forward is the degree to which someone is risk averse, and I think it's a big one. I have to agree with you. The the mindset of how much certainty you need or how much uncertainty you're willing to accept and the adventure that you're willing to go for or the risk that you're willing to take to go after a dream or something of that sort is one of the major factors, isn't it, that people would use as a filter to decide what the next stage of their life might be or what next major decision would be.
Absolutely. I mean, I've met people who've stayed in the same job for 40 years,
Yeah, I have too.
stayed in
I
a
have too.
relationship
Absolutely. Yeah.
when that relationship has lost all flavor, all color, and they stay because they feel more secure in that relationship. And in a way, that life becomes really, colorless, flavorless, odorless. And
Certainly can happen. I've seen that as well. And then, sometimes, using the relationship argument, I'm a little bit older now, so I see some friends and families are splitting, in their 60s and their 70s now. So they perhaps, had this risk averse kind of feeling, and it's now they're getting closer to the end of their lives, and all of a sudden something changes, like I'm not going to do this anymore. So that kind of break point in mindset could have happened earlier. So I would expect that you would argue that if they would have had some support in really addressing what served them in life and what didn't, that they might have made some of these decisions earlier than they're making them now.
I think so.
Yeah,
And that's why it says, rethink, reimagine,
yeah,
and reset your life because it's not just the thoughts. Thoughts are, in a way, very limiting, but imagination is not. Imagination breaks the boundaries.
yeah.
And then, the reset is the courage to just move forward and do something differently. You
So
know,
you're
you
telling me
get,
that perhaps I
go
shouldn't
ahead.
let my wife of 45 years read this book.
It depends on how well you've worked to make those 45 years worthwhile and
I've
cement the
done my
relationship
best, Faye. I
well.
promise I've done my best. No, I'm very blessed in that regard. That's the only reason I would joke about it. But I
Yes.
do hear you. And the the thing that I find when I work with some executives is that they haven't really looked inward to see some of these things you're talking about, to really examine their own character or their own risk profile, as we were just talking about, or their own propensity for risk. And
Mhm.
as a result, they're really shooting from the hip a lot of the times and not making what appears to not making rational decisions in their business and in their life. And a lot of these people climb through, functional silos to get to, you know, positions of leadership, and they don't really have the training, but they don't have a mentor, and they don't have a maybe it's a consultant or a coach to stand beside them. And I see what happens is they get really wrapped heavily into a level of momentum that just keeps repeating itself, and it doesn't move the business ahead, it doesn't move them ahead. How do you address those kinds of dilemmas when there hasn't been the opportunity to do the examination, to make conscious intentional choices about where a person or a business should move when they're leaders in an organization?
One of the terms that I've come up with and I've written a lot about is something I call the bankruptcy of leadership. And what I mean by the bankruptcy of leadership is confusing the function of leading with a position, with a title, with a paycheck. That's not leadership. That's working to achieve a position or a role that somehow you believe is going to give you status or it's going to give you some kind of satisfaction. And some people are quite happy with that. They don't want a position of leadership because it carries responsibility. One of the surprising findings in our work is that the level of self-awareness among senior leaders averages 5 out of 10 on a scientific tool that we use to measure this,
Hmm.
and some even lower, and yet they're in very senior positions.
Hmm.
When you're not self-aware, you are always looking outside of yourself for a reason, for the cause, for somebody to blame. And so you never grow as a leader because self awareness means you have to look in the mirror, you have to take that painful inward journey
Hmm.
and say to yourself, there are some aspects about me that I don't understand, I haven't examined, and they're getting in my way. And I need the courage to address those. Self awareness is only the first part. Now, some people will go to self awareness and they will say, oh, yeah, this is who I am. And it's true and it's accurate. And oh my goodness, it's so spot on. And they stop there. And the reason they stop there is that to get out of that rut of so-called self-awareness, which they brag about as a position of pride. Oh, yeah, I know myself, but this is who I am. It takes work to get out of the rut and reshape the direction of your life. And that's self-management. And self management means you're now going to, what you alluded to, make conscious choices. But conscious choices based on the awareness of who you are, what your liabilities are, what your strengths are, the kind of people that you may unconsciously choose to put in your team that may not be the best ones. Simply, they make you feel good. And the third piece is when you go beyond that and you achieve what I call self mastery, where you are in control of your ego and you have the courage to say no when it counts. And you're not driven by satisfying other people because you recognize that by satisfying others, if that is not aligned with who you are, the one who's going to be most dissatisfied is yourself. And so that's not a fulfilling life.
I'm
So
smiling
that,
because I'm smiling
yeah.
because the leadership construct and the coaching that I do is very highly aligned. I knew they would be
Mhm.
based on our previous conversations and the things I've read about you. So you're absolutely right. The first part of the journey is to really get the leader to look at themselves objectively and to really
Mhm.
examine and become self-aware. And there's a number of ways to do that, but when you're sincere, we can find the answers. And then sometimes it's a difficult step for to get them to say, okay, given that this is true, what is moving me toward where I want to be and what's moving me away? So what serves me and what doesn't serve me relative to the direction I want to go. And I work with people typically who already have decided they want to be the highest expression of themselves. They want to reach that level of mastery, as you call it.
Mhm.
And I think, they recognize that it's a journey and you're always working to take one more step and to be better. And I love working with people with that kind of energy and that kind of desire. But even then, as you said correctly, to works do the work so that when you're in the moment, when the heat is up and decisions need to be made, and you have to decide what serves you versus what serves your leadership role, what serves the team, what serves everyone involved, and to really have the courage and the integrity and the sense of purpose to make the right call, to be that person who's calm in the storm and who will be someone who everyone can look to and really admire. And I say that, you as a leader, there's a certain level, not that you're working for admiration, but by behaving in a way that's selfless to the correct extent that it needs to be, and putting the goals of everyone and the good of everyone in the organization in front. I just find that those servant leaders become admired. And then people will run through walls for them and their performance begins to accelerate and they work together and it just grows as something that's an entity of itself, an organization that can have fun and really bond together while they're moving in the right direction because the leader is aligned the way you're talking about. So I was smiling because I could see that kind of vision of that kind of leader, and I love to help people to get there when I can.
It's not always possible because you need a willing
Exactly,
partner,
exactly, exactly.
not to follow your advice, but to go through that
Right,
journey of exploration and discovery.
exactly.
And in a way, the media, the personal branding, and all the other movements that we've had have created an impression that leadership is a popularity contest. And that is a disaster because a popularity contest, by definition, is meeting the lowest common denominator.
Right,
And when you're gone, you're gone. And we substitute that so-called popularity, which means you're subverting your principles to please other people for I don't know what reason, but you have substituted responsibility of leadership, which is a word I like very much, taking responsibility for your decisions and the consequences of those decisions, which is what leadership is. And whether we call it servant leadership or something else, it's people who take the consequences of their decisions seriously enough to pause before making the final decision of which direction they're going to move.
exactly right.
Popularity is a really short-term thing. People look at what they wear and what they say, and all the paraphernalia that they surround themselves with, rather than what is the impact I'm going to have, and how am I going to make that impact positive one? How can I make it beneficial to a large majority of people? That's responsibility rather than popularity.
Yeah,
Weak
popularity is
leaders,
is a weak substitute. It's a weak imposter. I 100% agree.
definitely.
Yeah,
And many of those people don't have the courage to hold the people who they work with accountable. They don't hold themselves accountable.
right.
So,
Yeah,
dilution of standards. Look at so many
yeah,
companies that are now, their brand is eroding. I don't want to name any of them, but I'm sure you and I can think of many whose brand
right.
is absolutely eroding because of that type of bankrupt leadership.
Yes, and you can see it in the way they project that brand into the marketplace, but the same sort of behavior deteriorates the internal organization as well. So there's a fine line there. So I'm not competing with your point at all, but the reality is that while popularity can sometimes betray your values and lead you down the wrong path, as you discussed, there is a real need to, if you're going to be in an organization and attempt to achieve and rise within that organization to higher and higher levels of responsibility, you have to play by the rules of that game to some extent, or you're going to take yourself out of the game. So I work with clients to try and identify the place where you don't have to betray your values. You don't betray the courage that's needed to stand up for what's right, but that you play within the construct sufficiently so that you don't get yourself put in the penalty box. Do you know what I'm saying? So there's a real world there as well as the philosophical kind of one that we're kind of talking about here.
It's a very, very important point. You need to be a really good diplomat.
Yes, I think that's well said.
You need to understand the organizational politics. And as you said, you need to play within the rules of that game, as long as the rules of that game don't put you in a position
Exactly.
where it goes way beyond your
Yeah.
values. People don't leave organizations because of they disagree on values, and it becomes very hard to live with that
Yeah.
dysfunctionality long term. It
Sure.
takes a toll on your health, mental and physical.
You should leave. If your
Yes.
ethics and values don't align with the company you're working with, you need to leave. And I've encouraged many people to leave their companies because there were things that were happening that they would never agree to personally or individually. Yet for some reason they're tolerating this unethical behavior in the company they're part of. And I think there they have their priorities a little bit out of whack. But yeah, 100%. You're absolutely right. So in this program, I mean, you and I could go on having this conversation for a long time, I'm sure. But we like to hear a story from key executives like yourself. Do you have a story you can share with us, something that happened, and we'll talk for a few minutes about what the leadership lessons inside that story might be? I'd love to hear it.
Yes, I'd like to go back to my university days when I was a dean. I had a really nice office on the top floor of the building.
Hmm.
And, my office was the envy of so many people because at the time I was teaching humanities. One of the things was theater.
Yes.
And my office had these wonderful murals of scenes from some of the productions I had directed.
Hmm.
But it was in the middle of a war, something that has been designated as a civil war, but we're not going to get into that.
Yeah. Understand.
So every day you get up, you go to work early in the morning. I had four children, I sent them off to school. I didn't know if they would be coming back home because you could have bombing at any time. But that day seemed like any other day. Went to my office. The bombing was quite heavy that night. And when I arrived, there was nothing. It's just smoke and
Your
ashes.
beautiful office was gone?
It was totally bombed out and burned. So there was no office, there
Oh
was
my.
nothing. All I had of 17 years of work was a briefcase in my hand. And
Very sad.
it it was a very strange sensation because you have to ask yourself when you've lost everything. I mean, it was the early days of computers, so I didn't have everything stored. A
Hmm.
lot of it was paper, was burnt and gone. So what's left? What's there? And who are you when everything that you've worked for 17 years and built
Hmm.
up is just up in smoke?
Hmm.
I think that's a time when I had to ask the most difficult questions of all. Did I want to continue in that role? Was it a disaster or was it an opportunity? And for me, it was the most profound turning point in my life because it forced me to evaluate who I was, what mattered to me, what was number one on my priority list. And I took some of the most difficult decisions I've ever made in my life at that time. So, in a way, losing the things that looked like it was your support base forced you to step out of the boundaries and design a new kind of life. And that's why the front cover of my book has a phoenix on it.
Hmm.
The mythological bird that rises from the ashes reinvents itself. And so, in a way, when you lose everything, it forces you to get to the core of who you are, to redefine your identity, and possibly I left the deanship. I resigned from that position, not right away, but I resigned from that job, which a lot of people thought was crazy because it could have been a job for life if I wanted it.
Hmm.
I separated from my husband. My eldest son was at university age and sent him off to university on his own to New York. And so many fundamental things changed, and I started my own business in the midst of a war,
Hmm.
which sounds insane.
Sounds insane.
Yes, but it wasn't.
Good. And and so in this story, I mean, I'm first of all, I'm so thankful that that bomb hit your office and not your home that night, right? That's a blessing. But it's interesting. So did you at that point in your life, I mean, you weren't the fully, developed leader and leadership transformational coach and author that you are today back then. I'm sure you were very accomplished and very good at your job.
Absolutely not.
Yeah, but you were you were a flower who was budding, but you weren't quite grown. Was there a connection to that office? I mean, you spoke about the office fondly when you mentioned it. Was that a part of the definition of who you were, do you think, to some extent? And then when it got bombed out, you realized that you lost a big piece of yourself, or and you had to overcome that?
I was a founder of that university, Wade.
Yeah,
I was one of the founders.
yeah,
I worked 12, 14-hour days
yeah. I'm not saying you didn't
to,
deserve it. I'm not saying you didn't deserve it. I'm just saying
yeah,
that you were
I'm
attached
not
to it.
defending. I'm
Yeah,
agreeing with you that, I had poured so much of my life into
yeah,
that.
yeah.
And it's the hardest thing in the world to walk away from something that you contributed to, that you partially created, people who looked up to you, your identity, the definition of who you were, and all the
Mhm.
people who depended on you.
Yeah, absolutely.
And one of the stories in my book is about how hard I had to fight to get the certificates and diplomas of the students I taught, to get them to issue them because they wanted them to move to a different university. And it almost cost me my life. And I'm not exaggerating,
Oh my
they
goodness.
tried to run me off the road. But I did succeed in getting them their diplomas.
Good for you.
And I walked away from that kind of environment and decided that for me, leadership mattered. Working with people whose decisions affected the lives of many was one of the most important things that I could do, because it's not that those people were incapable or unintelligent,
Right.
is that they weren't willing to even take a tiny risk to do what's right.
Hmm. Yeah, that's
And
difficult.
when you see that your decisions impact the lives of tens or hundreds or thousands or even millions of people, that is an awesome power you have in your hands. And it doesn't mean that you have to fight people. Sometimes what it takes is asking a question that stops people in their tracks, that opens a window for them that they have never looked through. And I can tell you that there are times when I'm working with difficult people, I will spend hours at night thinking of what is that question that I could ask this individual that would stop them in their tracks. And sometimes those questions are very, very simple. Like, when is the last time you were absolutely wrong about something? What was that? And I have frozen silence.
Hmm. Yeah, that could be a showstopper for the person who hasn't been wrong in a long time. In their own mind, of course, we're talking about.
Exactly.
Yeah,
And so when you get to that level of conversation, and of course these things are private and confidential,
of
and you
course.
go deeply into it,
Yeah.
for the people who have the courage and the desire to be effective leaders, it's changing, it's transformational.
It is transformational. I think that's a reason, it's a good reason to have that in the title of your company because it isn't just about leadership, it's about transformation of character and individual as well. So when you went through this horrific situation where you lost the office and you lost your all your papers and all your work, you said it was that you had to decide it was a disaster and opportunity. And earlier on in our conversation, you talked about the importance of making decisions that are well grounded in in fact and consideration and advice from others. Was this one of those points where you really stepped back and you took some time to make an active decision, or was this something that was just a choice you made because it was urgent, the war happened, the office was gone, and then you just made a choice?
I'd be telling a lie if I said I had time to step back. I had a family to support.
Right.
I had I had to bring in money to pay expenses.
Yeah.
So I had to do whatever it took to make ends meet.
Right.
And in a way, it was a default, it was defiance, it was rebellion, it was a lot of confusing emotions that I worked through it by doing things that were practical. Crazy. When I say crazy, I mean I'm living in a war zone and I'm going across confrontation lines
Hmm.
and doing work with all the different communities that were butchering each other.
Oh my goodness.
So getting to know these people as someone, and that's why I don't belong to a particular group. I don't believe in subscribing to narrow pigeonhole philosophies. I believe in being open to understanding other human beings, understanding who they are, why are they in the position they're in, and that exploration in different areas and different zones where I was potentially an outsider and I was potentially a person whose life could be at risk.
Hmm.
But I found that I got acceptance. I found that I was able to break through those barriers because I wasn't going there with prejudice. I wasn't interacting with them as if I knew best.
That's
I was
important.
giving them a chance to be sincere, to be open. In a way, it was a relief to be able to talk about difficult things. And so, in a way, my final choice of career evolved out of, starting from a broad base of education, moving into leadership and change management. I became a clinical hypnotherapist. I went deeply into the whole psychology of change management
Hmm.
and psychometric measurement and understanding human behavior at a deeper level.
Hmm.
And I believe that shaped who I became
Hmm.
and the discovery of myself. It, it's not by sitting down at a desk and philosophizing and discovering. It's realizing what you're doing is working, listening to what people say to you as a result of that relationship. And people coming up and saying, you've changed my life, you've made a difference. I wouldn't have done this if it wasn't for you. And that gave me the motivation and the strength to keep moving in that direction that was working. It wasn't a pretense, it was real.
Yeah, you're walking down a real road. And it took a lot of courage to do what you were doing. It's great that you had that inherent characteristic and that willingness to take the risks that you had to take. I mean, in many situations in the world, the people on the opposing sides won't let you take the middle road. They deny the middle road, and so it sounds like you were able to engineer one that you could ride on and move down it effectively. And so good for you. I mean, it's a tremendous story. I'm
Drove
sorry
through
you had to
banana
go.
fields.
I'm sorry you had to go through all of that.
I said I was driving through banana fields.
Oh, okay. Yeah,
There were
exactly.
no roads.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So yeah, even the metaphor is a little bit misplaced. So so when I get to an end of a conversation like this, because this has been very rich and very helpful, I like to ask the guest just a couple of simple questions. So after it all, if you could just give one piece of advice to your younger self, rewind a few decades and say, okay, if I had to do it all over again, would I need to hear as a young person that I know now?
Don't take yourself too seriously.
Good.
Do not follow anybody's prescription. Learn to listen to yourself on a very profound level. Have the courage to be yourself.
Those are, that's not one thing, but that's a lot of good things.
Yeah, but I would say if I wanted to do one thing, I'd say have the courage to be yourself, but it requires all those other
Requires the other things. Yeah, no,
steps to
that's
get
fair.
there.
I'm just teasing you. It's absolutely fine. I think that's really good advice because sometimes when we're younger and we're lacking experience, we're looking, and we need to look to others and mentors and situations and learn, but
Sure.
sometimes we don't have the courage to be ourselves. We attempt to be someone else that we're mimicking or we're monitoring. So I think that's very good advice because there's something powerful in the fundamental beliefs and values and ethics and intent that we have. And it can get watered down if we start um, playing by other people's rules too much. Okay, let's fast forward into the future. Let's say 20 years from now, you and I are having a coffee and we're talking about the things we've done in our careers, in our lives. What are you going to tell me you're most proud of, Faye?
I'm most proud of my children. I have contributed four amazing human beings to the world and decent, smart, with values that they have the courage to live by. And I think that's the most important achievement is to, if you have a family, is to be an outstanding parent, to be someone who can look at their children and say, I'm proud that I have contributed for people who themselves will continue to make the world a better place in whatever capacity they can.
Being a parent is the most beautiful thing in the world. It's one of the most difficult things as well. But
Yes,
a certain aspect of it, and I have a lot of people on the program who give that answer about their children. And it's really an exercise in leadership to a great extent as well. And you know, having to, for example, having the courage to tell your children what they need to hear instead of what they want to hear. You know, a good leader doesn't let someone drive their car off the cliff, right? They don't let them make a decision that's going to ruin their life. And sometimes they're dead set to do that. They just believe that it's the only path for them. And,
yes,
you know, if you love them, you'll tell them the truth instead of tell them what they want to hear to protect yourself so that you don't have to get in a conflict with them. So just that is one example that kind of relates back to the conversations we had about courage and leadership.
exactly.
So, you know, excellent. Well, you know, listen, Faye, you've been a tremendous guest on the program. Just, I want to just have you talk about your book one more second. So if someone wants to get your book, how do they go about it? It's available now. Is it available on Amazon?
Available on Amazon. It's available on Ingram Spark. There is a link that would take them straight to the book. They can get a Kindle version or they can get a printed copy. If they want a personal signed copy, they can send a request to my email and I'll send that to them as a hard copy.
Fantastic.
You know, I have a hard copy version and they can get that signed and sent directly to them. So, yeah, it's available on all those platforms.
All right. Decisions that matter.
Decisions that
Rethink,
matter.
reimagine, and
Reimagine,
reset your
reset.
life. Yeah,
Yes.
I love that. Rethink, reimagine, reset. And if folks wanted to stay in touch with you, also your email how would they do that?
My email, Fay at ICTN.com, really easy. My LinkedIn,
Hmm.
I'd love people to join. I have Substack, Instagram. I am pretty active on social media. I write a lot. I love writing. And next week, we're doing a program called Who Are You After AI, where we're looking at what is our relationship with AI and how do we want to use it. So that's
Interesting. I spend a great deal of my business coaching time on that exact topic now. We work to understand where human intelligence and artificial intelligence come together in the most productive ways. And I think it's a very worthwhile topic for today. Embracing it, not being fearful and running from it. So good for you.
and recognizing that human intelligence and machine intelligence are very different things. In fact, it's not intelligence,
Exactly.
and it has to be redefined.
Yeah.
Anyway,
Yeah.
it's been
Great
wonderful
being with you.
talking to you, Wayne.
Yeah, great being with you as well. All the best to you, and we'll hopefully stay in touch. God bless.
Look forward. Take care.
Well, that's it for Driven to Lead today. We really appreciate you being with us. Share this with a friend or a business colleague if you would. And if I could remind you again, please hit the like and subscribe buttons. We're very grateful for that. So until next time, always remember, the high road leads to a better place.